Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We have a story here from the Holyrood magazine, and in which one of the very few decent people who is a member of the SNP is calling out for sense and reasonable policies. This, of course, is Joanna Cherry, someone I do actually have some time for, a woman I think who joined the wrong party. If she could just get over her idealised version of independence, she could make a very good MP within just about any other party. Certainly she's got the respect of people. She talks sense. She's intelligent. She isn't mental. She isn't twisted. And what she's saying is that following the Cass review, we touched on this yesterday, children in Scotland need to be protected. The Cass review reviewed within England. However, the issues will be the same north of the border. And she's saying that they need to look at this, take it in the round, and do the same thing. Sort of ban puberty blockers, ban advanced surgery, all these things. Protect children. The Cass review showed that something like 97.5% of children who present and who are treated aren't actually trans. It's the biggest medical lawsuit in waiting ever, because they're destroying children's lives. And they're doing so because of ideology, dogma, and the power of a very tiny minority called the trans lobby. So let's take a look at what Joanna Cherry's saying and why she is, of course, right. Here goes. Now, what's weird about Joanna Cherry is she's prepared to stand up and go against the dogma of her own party, the policy of them being the gender reforms and let's push this and let's allow that and all these sort of things. Whereas Joanna Cherry, very much one of the naysayers, she is someone who says and talks very strongly of women's rights and freedoms, the fact that she doesn't want men going into women's safe spaces. And here she's talking about the protection of children. She doesn't want children's lives destroyed because of somebody else's insistence that children need to be turned into eunuchs and sterilised on grand industrial scales. Who'd have thought that was controversial? But, I stand on this one with Joanna Cherry. Not necessarily on all her politics, of course, but, if I may, you can cherry pick them, and that's exactly what I'm doing. On this one, Joanna Cherry is completely right, and I think anyone with any kind of decency or normalcy would agree with her. I think she's carrying the view of 99.9% of the population. So SNP MP Joanna Cherry calls for gender services redesign and an end to puberty blockers following the Cass review. Now the Cass review is a big old thing. It's about 400 pages. I haven't read it yet. Not to my shame or anything. It's simply I haven't got the time to sit and read through 400 pages. And it will be very dry, medical based. But that's the problem. Medical knowledge, fact, not opinion, fact. There'll be an opinion in the summary, but it's only an opinion based on expert knowledge. But when she's looking at the facts of the case, and it comes out that what they're doing to children is immoral and wrong, and ultimately very destructive, then you can see why a lot of people are going against the Cass report. Most people, 99.9%, think it's brilliant, but the trans lobby absolutely loathe it. And they're saying, oh, she's locked into this mindset, blah, 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 she's transphobic and that. She's not. Her view wasn't to cast judgment one way or another on trans people. Her judgment was to see what the effects were on the majority of children who are being pushed through the system, often against their will. Anyway, SNP MP Joanna Cherry has written to Scotland's Chief Medical Officer calling for the recommendations from the Cass review to be implemented in Scotland. In a letter co-signed by former Scottish Green leader and MSP Robin Harper, the pair call for immediate and long-term changes to the delivery of healthcare to gender-questioning children. They also call for an end to puberty blockers being prescribed to children and young people in Scotland. The Cass review, named after its chair, Dr. Hilary Cass, concluded children accessing gender identity services in England needed to be provided with holistic care, including screening for neurodevelopmental conditions and a mental health assessment. Often, and this has come up in her report, often these children who present as trans aren't. They are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, or they are grieving, or there are, domestic issues at home, parents splitting and things like that. All sorts of issues going on. And the children are grubbing around desperately in the dark, trying to get hold of something that will make their life better, unknowing. And then, of course, it's seized upon by the predators of the trans lobby who push these children forward, grist to the mill, cannon fodder in their war against normalcy and decency. And so they just destroy these children's lives because, they don't care. These children are nothing to them. And if they can destroy a few lives, it doesn't really matter, kind of thing. But it matters to the children. It matters to their families. Also, you're getting transhousens. Parents unable to accept that their child is gay, and so having to say, it's not gay, he's in the wrong body, he's in the wrong way, let's make him a girl so that when he goes with boys it's fine. And it isn't fine. Anyway, it said it found a lack of reliable evidence on which to base clinical decisions for transsexuality, and it warned that the rationale for using puberty blockers remains unclear. While the review did not cover services in Scotland, it has led to a number of politicians questioning the practices in place for gender questioning young people north of the border. Writing to Professor Gregor Smith, who has responsibility for providing clinical advice on professional standards and policy advice to Scottish ministers, Cherry and Harper say that the guidelines being followed in Scotland are clearly no longer acceptable and must be urgently reviewed. Because the rules or the evidence that acquired in England will not be that far different from north of the border in Scotland. There may be a few tiny tweaks here and there, but generally the things are going to be the same, aren't they? And so, human nature being what it is. And so, yes, the Cass report must be the basis of change and protection for children north of the border. Use it. Use the evidence-based. It is evidence-based. It's not opinion. Use it, employ it in its best means, and create protections for children. Don't pander to the trans lobby, which has vested interests and wants these children to be used like this to try and increase their numbers, to make it look, it's so common. It's not common at all. And as Cass pointed out, 97.5% of children presenting weren't gender questioning at all. They weren't trans. They were just insert mental condition. The NHS in Scotland has been slow to react to emerging evidence of the harm of these practices, and all too often relies on international best practice as a catch-all to avoid difficult conversations. The practice may have become internationalised, but it is clearly far from best. Many other European countries are currently reviewing or have reviewed their practices in this area. The publication of the Cass Review today should be an urgent wake-up call that services for children and young people must be urgently redesigned and puberty blockers removed from use in Scotland. Because they lie. These people say, oh no, they're fine, they're reversible, they're harmless and they're reversible. First of all, they're not harmless. Secondly, they're not reversible. You're going through a period of puberty, you're going through a period of change in your body that is a one-way change. It cannot be reversed. It cannot be changed. You cause that. It's not just the sexual changes that occur. It's all the other changes from all these hormones rushing through the body. It's that big burst of growth, of muscle build, of all sorts of things. You delay that in a boy who then thinks he's a girl, then realises he isn't. He's destroyed forever and sterile forever. Girls having all sorts of things done to them, breast removed, all sorts of things. You don't remove healthy tissue. That should be the number one thing. And any doctor that does must be immediately struck off and never work in medicine again, and be on a register to never be anywhere near children again. Scottish Conservatives have also called for a pause in the use of puberty blockers following an announcement last month that they would no longer be prescribed to children in England except as part of clinical trials. I don't even think there should be clinical trials. Deputy Leader Megan Gallagher added, if the SNP won't heed the recommendations by the Cass Review, then they must urgently undertake their own evaluation so that we can protect the well-being of young people, especially children, accessing these services, starting with the pausing of the use of puberty blockers. because it is creating, as I say, an entire generation of eunuchs. The Scottish Government said it had been closely monitoring findings and it would now take the time to consider the final report, but it did not commit to implementing any of its recommendations. A spokesperson said, "We agree with Dr. Hilary Cass when she highlights that the increasingly toxic, ideological and polarised public debate does nothing to serve the young people accessing this care, their families and the NHS staff working hard to care for them." And since the Cass review was commissioned, we've closely monitored ongoing findings with the Scottish Government officials and NHS Scotland clinicians, meeting Dr. Cass on a number of occasions to share information about improved work in Scotland. But they won't do anything because they are beholden, aren't they? They're beholden to the trans lobby. This is why the whole of the gender reform bill was pushed through so hard until it was thankfully taken off the table by Alistair Jack, showing good sense for once. So well done, Joanna. Highlight it, push it, keep that fight up. I'm standing with you. I think everyone who is right-minded, who is decent and who is concerned for the wealth and health and safety of children will stand with you. Regardless, I think this is non-party political. I think this has got to be non-party political. You may be SNP, Joanna, but this fight that you're on is a humanitarian fight, not a party political one. Coming up. Imagine they'd got the responsible adult or the responsible person's act through. A child could say to his parents in Scotland that I want to be a girl, and the parents say, "Don't be silly, you're a boy." At that point, the state could walk in, take the child from the parent, put the child through gender reassignment, hand this child a box, inside would contain its own testicles, and pat it on the head and send it on its way, and said, "You're a girl now." And there's nothing the parents could do. That's what the SNP wanted. That was their final goal. They wanted ownership of all the children, and then they wanted to be able to just do this to them. And people still vote for these people. People still vote for the SNP. How can you sit there, look at what the SNP want to do, and vote for them? It's like turkeys voting for Christmas. Look to your children and just think, do you want the SNP to take your child from you, operate on it without your consent, and then hand you back a girl if you had a boy, or a boy if you had a girl? And you still vote for them. Mental. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. I'll speak to you later. Bye.